video recorder. Okay. Being offered forever. Force you to watch the talk later. I'll put it on her feed until later.
Okay.
Jai Ma. Om Kali. This on also? There's 5 things to turn on. It was hard enough to get like students to pay attention. Now we have to get electronics to pay attention. Okie doke. Chant Om together. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devyamatриksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarva Lokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadaramasya Sarva Dharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Bande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Jai Ma. I forgot, sorry. So we're picking up, we're reading from the Kali, we're discussing the Kali Sahasranāma, the 1,000 names of the goddess, Divine Mother Kali. And of course, the most famous of the Sahasranāmas is, the 2 most famous Sahasranāmas, Vishnu Sahasranāma and Lalita Sahasranāma. But of course, we're a Kali temple, and we always joke that we spent 11, 12 years, actually 15, 16 years never talking about Kali. Right, reading primarily from the Bhagavatam and other texts like that. So by beginning these talks on the Kali Sahasranāma every week we do it. There's 4 or 5 names, and that's also tells so many things about Kali, about the Divine Mother tradition, Shakti tradition, a lot of philosophy, a lot of stories of different forms of the goddess, different goddesses. And so right now we're on verse 24. Which is the names start at our 166 name. I read last week's just for the sake of set it up. Verse 23. Katyayani Jaganmata Jagatam Parameshwari Jagabandhu Jagadatri Jagananandakarini. So while Katyayani was there, we spoke about this name Katyayani, but the primary cluster of name was Jagat. And so the reason I want to back up a little bit to this verse is because the first name of the next verse also has the word Jagat in it. So we have to kind of back it up a little bit. It's very much connected in these clusters of name. So Jagat, we mentioned Jagat. We spent an hour and a half on the word Jagat last week, but comes from the word for moving. So it's the moving. It's everything that moves is Jagat, and so that's a way of saying the universe or the world, and then it becomes by extension our world. The world of experience is Jagat, right? And it's connected with the idea of so you have Jagat, the moving world, and that's up against Brahman or Atman or something like that, or that's the non-moving, right? So the term Jagat as the world implies there's something that's not moving, that's absolute, not changing, not changeable, not describable like that. And then another term we mentioned is often in discussion on Vedanta and the like is Jiva-jagat. Jagat, the world, and Jiva is individual souls, individualities. Right. We won't use, the problem with saying individual souls, that's already bringing an extended concept, right? Our friend Igor always points out what for lack of a better word, Christians call a soul, right? It's actually Jiva is a slightly different conception, but it's okay to say like that. So we have the mother of Jiv Jagat, another way of saying, not just Jagat, of souls, individuals, are us and our world. Right, so she's the source of that, and therefore, by implication, not only she's the reservoir, the creatrix, the womb from which the entire world of name and form and individuals who experience name and form exist and come from. That's the obvious meaning of Jagat Mata, but the idea also that there's something moving, it comes from something, right? So that something is also establishing Ma as Brahman, not just Jeev Jagat. So these names played with that. Jagat Mata, Jagatam Parameshwari. In this world, she is the Parameshwari, the supreme goddess. Jagat Bandhu, she is the friend of the world, the universal friend, or the friend of this experiential world of change, movement, name, and form. And Jagadatri, that's what we spent a lot of time on, the one who supports the world. And I forgot to mention, we mentioned a little bit, we discussed a little bit, Jagadatri is considered her own goddess. Goddess Jagadatri, her puja is done after Durga Puja and Kali Puja, we mentioned like that. And she kills she's a four-armed goddess, golden, gory form, light form, and she kills a elephant demon. So we kind of like that. What I forgot to mention was in my notes, but I was like, I don't have to put it in my notes, I'll remember it. And of course I didn't remember it, is that she's connected very intimately with Ramakrishna, Holy Mother. Right, is that she came to Holy Mother's mother in a dream or a vision and said, I want to be worshipped in your family. Perhaps actually maybe she was worshipped by the ancestors of the family. But and it's also true that the Jagadatri Puja had fallen out of practice. Durga Puja and Kali Puja are super popular in Bengal, although the year is planned around, like Christmas here. So you can't get away from Christmas and New Year. So Kali Puja, Durga Puja, you can't get away from. But Jagadatri Puja, it's on the calendars, but not really. It wasn't that popular. It was beginning, so what I understand, beginning to lose its popularity in the villages. And unlike Durga Puja, it was a huge puja done by zamandirs. This is landowners and rich people, and it was done because it's such an expensive puja. So that was done primarily in the cities, and in townships like that by landowners. But Jagadatri Puja is not such a fancy puja; it's more simple. And so she appeared to Holy Mother's mother. What's Holy Mother's mother's name? Chandradev. I want to say Chandradev. That's Ramakrishna's mother. I'm forgetting. Shama Sundari Devi. Shama Sundari Devi. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Shama Sundari Devi. Which is, I want to be worshipped, but I'm very poor, right? No, don't worry, you'll be able to do, right? He says and something like your daughter will help you, your daughter's children will help you, something like that. So she began in her home. Her daughter means Holy Mother, and her daughter's children meaning all the monks and devotees of the Ramakrishna tradition. So she began, and she herself would gather all the equipment and utensils, and have the puja done very beautifully, simple but beautifully. And so even after her passing, Holy Mother thought, I haven't looked at this in a long time, but the stories are there in the Swami Chaitanya's new book. It's on Holy Mother. These stories are there. But Holy Mother thought, no, she came to my mother, and now my mother has passed, so let it be finished. But then she came to Holy Mother and says, no, I want to still be worshipped in your family, something like that. I'm hoping I'm telling that story true. If it's not, it's a good story to tell, so we'll just assume that's true. And so Holy Mother continued the performance of the Jagadatri Puja, especially at her home village in Haimavatī, and it's still going on now. But also it's become more, I think partially because of that, and the popularity of Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna and their Leela, the fame of their Leela, the deity has become more popular, and the puja is done more often now, from what I understand. Also, Holy Mother herself, she appeared as Jagadatri. There's when we meditate, and we meditate on the Leela of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, especially in the Ramakrishna tradition, we've tried, to downplay a little bit the miraculous, right? Because like Swami Vivekananda made a statement to Swami Sahasranāma, when Swamiji at Bellarmine told us this. He was telling us a very miraculous story of Sri Ramakrishna, where like Hanuman jumped out of a tree as a child and gave him fruit. It's like all these, and it's like, really, Swamiji? I never heard that story. Oh no, we know all these stories. We know they're true, right? Even Swamiji said these stories are true, but he told Sahasranāma, don't include those stories, right? Because he says that otherwise there'd just be another miracle, mythological, like resurrections of the dead and miracle births and Buddha being born out of the side of his mother, and all these stories that have very deep meaning, maybe happened, maybe are symbolic of something, right? But it becomes that time, and nobody will have faith in Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, right? So when you tell his story, tell only the miraculous side that can't be avoided without missing an important part of his life, right? It's not that we don't believe other things happened, right? But just we're not focusing on that, so the result. So same thing with Holy Mother. There's the main. So it's interesting. It's like a unique form of like reverse hagiography, right? Hagiography, when you write the lives of saints, you embellish or like that. We're almost like trying to clean up and make it less fantastical than it actually is, because otherwise, in modern times, nobody takes the saints seriously. If it's so supernatural, it becomes overtly mythological, and we can't take it seriously anymore. Nowadays we don't take mythological serious. Now, that's the reversal of the trend, right? So So there's many examples of Sri Ramakrishna. People's stories of Sri Ramakrishna have seen Sri Ramakrishna in visions. Of course, that's one thing. That's a natural thing. But also, even in his life, people seen Sri Ramakrishna as different gods and goddesses. Swami Chaitanya has a great chapter in one of his books, I think, How to Live with God. I think it's in one of the chapters of that book, where he said. I remember years ago, even before we were here, I think he read us that chapter in Bengali, a Bengali book he was publishing. He said, sometimes when he hasn't translated a chapter, he'll look at the Bengali and give a running translation, a loose translation. He did that at Usha's old apartment, and the article was called Bahe Rupe Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna in many forms, right? And we always say, Swami, you have to translate it. You have to translate. No, somebody will, his normal things. When I die, they'll translate it. They'll translate it badly, Swami, you have to translate it. Luckily, he translated it, cleaned it up, appropriate for an English-speaking audience. There's some adjustments, but it's really fascinating. It's called Sri Ramakrishna has many forms or something, in many forms. But there it shows Sri Ramakrishna, and all these, people saw him as Kali, as Shiva, as Krishna, as Rama, as Buddha, as Jesus, as half Kali and half Krishna, as it's just a listing of a collection of all the people's reminiscences. Oh, one time I was sitting there. Just this morning I read one, right? Not quite where who's telling the story? I don't remember, but one of Thakur's disciples, years later, after Sri Ramakrishna died, saw one of the sweepers at Dakshineswar still sweeping. He said, I remember you from way back when. You're still here. And the person said, "Oh yes, I'm still." He said, "You saw our master, right?" He goes, "Yes, yes, I saw him." Right, and he left it. He told me to sweep, so I'm sweeping. Then he was a shy person, and due to positions like that, people are scared to say too much and to be too front. So what did he say? He says, "Well, one time I was late at night. I came out at, this is not part of our class, but this is interesting. It's this morning's emotional story I read. I was late at night. I couldn't sleep, and I went walking in the garden of Dakshineshwar. He was a sweeper at Dakshineshwar. He was probably had a hut on the outskirts of it. Where the sweeper lived. And I saw a light shining from the Panchavati, actually where the Panchamundi, which is where Thakur, at the Panchavati of the 5 trees, where Thakur established 5 skulls for his tantric sadhana. And then I went and I saw Sri Ramakrishna sitting there, but glowing. There was no light. He himself, the light I saw was coming from his body in meditation, right? And it became overwhelmed. And then I went back to my room. I got scared and went back home. The next day I saw him in his room, and I went and I did pranams to him and touched his feet and was worshiping him. Sri Ramakrishna, why is all this extra devotion today, right? All this extra show of devotion. And he couldn't say anything, and he just was about to walk away. And Thakur said, "No, I understand." Right? He says, "So my instruction to you, my devotees in the future will come." This is before the disciples began to come. This is during his tantric, their sadhana. In the future they'll come. You keep keep the path and the Panchavati swept, right? With my devotee, and you meditate on the form you saw last night. He knew that he had saw this form, right? You meditate on that form, and keep this area clean. So I'm practicing that. I'm meditating on that form I saw, and all these years, and you all came later, right? And other devotees are also coming. Very beautiful. But this is just seeing him glowing in the dark, literally, shining light. But so many examples of that, of people seeing Sri Ramakrishna change in front of them, reveal different divine forms. So the same is true of Holy Mother, right? But the one that's most consistent of literally people seeing her as a different divine form, as a goddess, is usually Jagadatri. Many examples of this. Swami Chaitanya tells a story of a monk he interviewed, who was a disciple of Holy Mother. It's in his book also. That he was a brahmachari, young brahmachari, and he was a sevak of Holy Mother, Sharada Devi, and she had very bad rheumatism, right? And her feet were swollen and gnarled, and she had never wore shoes in her life, so they were not in good condition. An old woman, And he said, "My feet hurt, please press my feet." So he was doing some Guru Seva and pressing her feet. And he was seeing these old, wrinkly feet. This is his own words, right? Holy Mother, you don't think your feet are a shelter. And he was thinking, they say she's a goddess. They're calling her the goddess. The disciples of Sri Ramakrishna believe she's a goddess. She's just an old woman with gnarly feet, right? And then he says that all of a sudden, in place of her feet were 2 golden feet. And he looks up and he sees Ma Jagadatri with 4 arms, and he passes out. And slowly he comes to, and Holy Mother is saying, "My son, my feet hurt." And he goes back to massaging her old, right? There's a little thing, he got a glimpse of perhaps her, whatever, primary rupa as Jagadatri. I forgot to mention the cheese Jagat, and many stories like there's another, I remember the exact story, but in gist I'll tell the story. If it's slightly off, the point will still be there. I think with one of her cooks, she had a Brahmin cook, eccentric Brahmin cook. I think maybe he got in some legal trouble or something, but she showed mercy to him and hired like that. But he was very emotional and dramatic. And one time they were going she was traveling maybe from Calcutta to Jambati or Jambati to Calcutta, and she took her whole party, including her cook. And they stop beside of the road, and they're having have some food, some picnicky type of food, and so he gets her aside, right? He says, "Who are you?" "I'm your mother." No, who actually are you? I mean, I already have a mother type thing. I don't need another mother, I already have my earthly mother in my village. I don't and trying to say, they say you're a goddess. Oh, they say I'm a goddess. No, you say you're a goddess. Yes, I'm the goddess. No, saying it's one thing. Show me, And then she is so saying. If I remember the vision correctly, she right there on the side of the road showed herself as goddess Jagadatri, right? And then the vision broke, and then he was overwhelmed, and then he asked her, and then she said, "What you saw today, don't tell anybody until after I die." That's why we know the story. He didn't. He was the type that would tell everybody, "Look, everybody come." She's like, that type of create a ruckus, the drama. But then I remember one of the points she asked says, if your Jagadatri has two attendants, just like Vishnu has two attendants, Jai and Vijay, right? So Jagadatri also has Jai and Vijay. These are like the general attendants of God, right? So he said, if you're Jagadatri, whenever we worship Jagadatri, we worship her with her two attendants, Jai and Vijay, right? Who's Jai and Vijay, right? Without a doubt, Holy Mother mentioned it was Gopalarma, Yoginma, and who are the two attendants of Holy Mother? Golapma and Yoginma. These are two disciples of Holy Mother, disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, that spent the rest of their life taking care of Holy Mother, right? Very different personality. One was very rough personality and controlling, and one was more, but still they were always there, and they were always taking care. They were just always there, Jai and Vijay. So when Goddess Jagadatri descended, her Jai and Vijay also descended, right? So it's interesting so there's a connection between Jagadatri, and there's another. I'm just remembering stories are coming to me. During Jagadatri Puja, she was in Calcutta. It was away from home, not at the village, and a very poor devotee came. He says, "Ma, we have managed in our home to perform Jagadatri Puja. It's an expensive thing. You have to have an image made, hire a priest. Even a poor person can do it. It's not like Durga Puja. You have to be really rich to really pull it off. But still, it's a big deal. It could be really meaningful if you come and bless the occasion." And so in the story, and it's in the Gospel of Holy Mother, it's one of the Leelas that's there, that she goes, I think Gauri Ma and Durga Ma go with her, some of these important people, and they go and they just go to the person's house, they bow to the image, give a coin, donation to the priest type thing, take a little prasadam, and then they were very happy. All the family worshipped her feet and took her home, right? And she said, just see how even though it's such a poor family, the goddess was shining. The mother made a comment like that. But I remember when I was reading that, it says it's interesting. The real Leela is actually they have an image made at great expense, or some expense at least, and hire priests to do this puja the best they can, right? To invite the goddess of the universe there. But she literally came, right? And took their food and blessed the priest, right? In human form, she also came. So anyway, these are from last week's names: Jagadatri, Jagadbandhu, Jagadatri, Jagat Anandakaring, as we ended at the cause of the bliss of the entire world. All bliss in this world, she is the cause. So, verse 24, caught up. Jagaj-jīva-mayī, 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 Haimavatī, Māyā, Mahā-mahī, Nāga-yajño-pavītāṅgī, Nāginī, Nāga-śāyinī. The verse 24. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 names, 6 or 7 names. So the first one has again Jagat. Although it's slightly changed here, and actually I have to see a couple books I have one form and another form has a different spelling. So sometimes due to the way Sanskrit works, sometimes you put letters together, the letters change, but I'm not sure if that's what happened here. I have to double check. So here it says Jagaj-jīva, and other is Jagat or Jagad. I've seen Jagat, and Jagaj. All three are possibilities, but two versions I have Jagaj, so I left it like that. But it's Jagat. It's just because of the J at the end. Jagaj-jīva-mayī. So here we said Jeev Jagat, the soul and the individual and its world, and the world of it. Either it's the individual and the world, or the world of full of individuals. Jeev Jagat, or Jagat-jīva-mayī. So Mayī is a very complicated. It's a simple word, but Swami Ambikananda trying to, in the Katamrita translation, we've gone back and forth in so many different ways of translating Mayī. Like we say, Ananda-mayī. That's easy. She's blissful, right? Ananda-mayī is a blissful mother, right? Because Mayī means full. One definition of Mayī, right? It means full, right? But it's tricky because if Kali is also Ananda-mayī, actually, Haruda, Guruji Haradan, the priest who installed his Kali that he installed in his own home village, where he built a beautiful Kali temple. Actually, interesting. he came to Kali Mandir, he came to America 17 times, right? But you look what he lived in a small room at Dakshineshwar, right? But he used the money to build a beautiful temple, right? His village is called Ramakrishna village. I forget what it's called. Which word for Bengali for village? Ramakrishna Bhatti or something like that. And the Ma is Ma Anandamayi Kali, right? The blissful Ma. But it's a blissful Ma. It's like, oh, like, you know, like. But remember, we've been, one of the themes we've been doing in our discussion for Kali's names is that she by saying that she's beautiful, saying she's beautiful, and saying that she's beauty. She's beauty itself as well as attributed to her. So to say that she's blissful, that's okay. Ma's blissful. You just look at her look at Ma's beautiful and blissful face, right? But it's not like she attained something and therefore is blissful, or she put on makeup and became beautiful, right? She's beauty itself. It's just we attribute, but due to making an object of the principle itself, we think of her as the beauty as beautiful, the power as powerful. Ma is the most powerful. She's power. She's not powerful, but she's also powerful because she's the source of power, right? So in that sense, she's blissful. She's bliss. And she's a source of bliss, and she's experiencing bliss, right? So Anandamayi, right? So that's saying blissful. That's easy enough. I mean, but then we get Swami Ambikananda got to those names like, then there's Ichchamoyi Taratumi in Chakulicho-maricha, right? So what's Ichchamoyi? Means she's full of will, right? So it means blissful. Full of bliss means willful, means willful. Now, usually we think willful is not a good quality. A willful person is an egotistical person or a stubborn person. I'm a very willful person, and when I'm called a willful person, I'm very rarely, it's a compliment describing my divinity. You have to overlook a lot of these things to realize my divinity. We humbly request you overlook all these qualities. So but by saying she's Ichchamoyi, means she does what she wants. She is desire. She's desire. She's Itcha. So it's she's Itcha. I mean, she has her own way. Her will is done. Ichchamoyi. But also it's like she's volition itself. She's actually, to get a little technical in Tantra, we have Ichchamoyi Shakti, you have Itcha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti. Itcha Shakti, these are three powers of the goddess, you could say, or three aspects of Brahman, or three aspects of the self. Actually, they're based upon Satchitananda, actually, the three gunas, but here it's the power of will, Itcha, and volition, and Jnana, wisdom or knowledge, perception, wisdom, knowledge, like that, and then Kriya Shakti, movement, action. Right, so Ichchamoyi can be philosophically interpreted. She's full. The problem with this word "full" is a weird thing, right? And then it gets more complicated. It was Brahmamoyi. Is she full of Brahman? Is Brahman something different than her that she can fill up with? And if I say I am Brahmamoyi, I can say, I'm overwhelmed by Brahman, right? But she's described in many places. It's in the Shakta text, she's described as Brahman itself, Brahman herself. Let's say Brahman itself, right? So one of the things that Swamiji was playing with is maybe like she contains Brahman. That's an interesting idea. By saying she's full of Brahman, means that she's bigger than Brahman. Brahman is one of her qualities. We're saying I'm not like I'm blissful, I've attained bliss. No, I'm blissful. She's blissful because she's so great. Bliss is one of the things that's inside of her. She's the container for that. That's another way of thinking of this Mayi idea, right? So all these different ways to think of it. Now we have Jagaj-jīva-mayī, right? So is she? She could be full of souls and the world. Put all the souls in the world together, and you make Ma. Maybe, it's one way of. That's one way of thinking of it. And it's maybe that's what the name means. Some people have seen in this name kind of an idea that she's Jiv, and as a sense of life. So she's life in the world. She's the life of the world. The thing that makes Jagat move. The world becomes Jagat because of Jiva. The world moves, like with this body is dead body, but because of a soul or a person, an individual, it moves. So she's the Jiva of the Jagat, That's one way of thinking of this Jagat-jīva, right? Right. But how do I say, but when we say Brahma-mahī, the way it's usually the way we think of it as meaning philosophically is that she is Brahman itself. That's another. I think that's maybe the way Swamiji has chosen the translation. She is Brahman. She's Brahman by saying, "Oh, she's Brahman." Sakura says, Ramakrishna, she's Brahma-mahī, right? She is Brahman. Not like she has Brahman or attained Brahman or gives Brahman or contains Brahman. All these are aspects of it, but the point being made, she is Brahman. She's Brahman itself, right? So using that criteria, right, she is Jagat and Jiva, right? She is individuals and she is their world. She is us and our world. That's a very interesting idea, right? That's a very Shakta idea, ultimately, right? That there's only one being here, right? And she's become, this is a real thing, there's one being and she's become everything, including us, right? How? It's a mystery, of course, right? I mean, the 1,000 names are unfolding some of these ideas, but she's become everything, including us. So we sometimes say, she's the one speaking, she's the one listening she's speaking through my voice, she's listening through your ears, right? When, she's the one playing all the parts. Our Guruji, Swami Vishnavananda Maharaj, he used to, that was his, I shall tell you something secret. I shall also tell you on Facebook something secret. There's a problem when you try to do esoteric talks on Facebook. It's no longer by definition esoteric, right? But so anyway, it says, Jesus said, those who have ears, let them hear. I'll just make the statement, only a few will get it, But he used to say, actually, some unseen power. That was his philosophically sophisticated name for God. Some unseen power, right? He was a Shakta ultimately. By this definition, I think it was the unseen power. Interesting, this definition of as God is unseen power, right? We have electricity is a seen power, right? That's unseen power is electricity within the light. Light is the seen power. Sorry, what I meant to say. The unseen power is electricity, right? Here's an example. You say that electricity is light in a light bulb, is heat in a heater, is movement in a fan, is coldness in an air conditioner, is all these different type of things. It's one unseen, but it manifests in all these different ways. But the power is one and unseen. That was his metaphor, his example, or however. So he says, actually, the highest. This is the secret teaching. He says, that unseen power is playing as the individual souls. This is his mystery. This is a great mystery. It's playing as all the individuals, so including you and me, right? She's playing these parts. It's playing. He would use probably the it language because he was also a Vedantist. Yeah. Shakta and a Vedantist. The power was an it. We're Vedantas and Shakta. We're Shakta. He was the Vedantist and the Shakta. We're Shakta and Vedantas. So Brahman is a her, and from the way we explain it, him Shakti was an it. But that she's playing all these parts. How? Look at this. Last week we said like a dream. There's so many examples that are given. How in a dream we play all the one being playing all the parts and all the experiences and the whole world. It's a way of describing it. It's not exactly like that, but it's interesting. This name, Jagaj-jīva-mayī, she who is the world and living beings, or living beings and their world itself, themselves. Right. So that's that fits the other names. That's why was Jagat Bandhu and Jagat Datri and Jagat Mata. And, it fits the flavor of these Jagat Ananda Kālī. It fits these flavors of these names. So that's the end of the Jagat names and the first verse of the first name of this verse. And then it switches. There's, I think, a transitional set of names before the next little cluster, but they're all connected. The next name is Haimavatī. Haimavatī. I have to get the right. Haimavatī means, what does Haimavatī mean? You know what Haimavatī means? It's from the Himalayas. Himalayas actually comes from this name, right? So she who comes from the Himalayas. So this is, obviously it's a name for as Parvati. That's a simple, in common story, Parvati itself means she who comes from the mountain. The daughter of the, we say the daughter of the mountain, Parvati, right? Parvat means mountain, right? What's the mountain? In the stories, her father is the Himalayas, right? The Lord, the personification of the Himalayas. What's her mother's name? I have to go back to 832 episodes of Devangita Mahadev to remember, and I've already forgotten after over 800 episodes. Wow. We need to watch. I think we do have to watch again. At 800, you have to start over again, I think, and don't forget. But so it's a name for Parvati. It's another way of saying Parvati, right? The daughter of the Himalayas. She comes from the Himalayas, right? Now, yogis interpret Parvati significantly, right? And I believe this name transitions into names dealing with Nagas and Kundalini, right? So we have to. So we'll assume we can give it, because of its placement. We can assume that the names may have justify this way of thinking about Parvati, the kind of tantric yogi way. They say that Parvati, being born in the mountain, is just like she comes from the mountain. We have her. She's in the mountain, represents the body or the earth element or the Muladhara chakra, right? And therefore, so that's earth, and she's born from the earth, right? It means she exists within the body as Kundalini. This is the idea often given, right? And like Gauri Kund, where Ganesh is born, is the whole story where Parvati, who's the earth, who's a mountain herself, takes dirt from her own body and creates a child, so that becomes Ganesha, earth element from within the body. And what does he do? He guards her abode, her Kund, right? That Gauri Kund is the Kund of Kundalini, the pit, the pond, like that, at the base of the spine. That's how yogis interpret it. Of course, the stories of Parvati, the general stories of Shiva and Parvati don't have to be interpreted this way, and maybe it's a mistake to overly interpret it this way, right? But that is a yogic interpretation of Parvati, and I'm stating it because of the way this cluster of names is developing, Haimavatī. So she's born from the mountain. So this body is the mountain that she's born from. So she's born, in one sense, she comes out of the body, which is this is a symbol of the awakening of Kundalini. Energetically described that way. Psychologically, it could be described as transcending body consciousness. When consciousness is no longer trapped in the body, that's called enlightenment or transcending body consciousness, right? Yogis would describe it energetically as Kundalini fraying itself, chakra after chakra, tattva after tattva, beyond earth, beyond water, beyond fire, beyond air, into consciousness, and beyond mind and ego and buddhi, and it's a way of describing it, right? Until she has her, she's perfectly free. Or we can say when consciousness is no longer, when our consciousness is no longer attached to the body and identified with the body, that's the awakening of Kundalini. That's enlightenment. That's Parvati. She comes from the body, right? She's free. She's born from the body. That's one way to interpret it. But it's interesting that this name, Haimavatī, there's other goddesses by this name, right? It's a name for Parvati, right? It's also a name for the Ganga, right? Not saying that maybe this is identifying Kali with the Ganga. There's names in the Sahasranāma that will do that. I think one of her names is Ganga, for instance, right? So, but that's more overt. But that's on a later cluster. But so, and there's also a Vishwamitra's wife is called has a wife named Haimavatī. There's other important characters in the Mahabharata like that was his name. So with that, so Ganga is an interesting name. If we think of Ganga as the second most popular goddess named Haimavatī, it means it's not descending from the Himalayas, right? Because the Ganga descends. Actually, she's not the daughter of the Himalayas. She is the daughter she comes from heaven. Right? She actually descends from heaven and lands in the Himalayas and then descends to earth, right? That she falls in Shiva's hair and goes down, right? The Himalayas itself are Shiva's hair. So that's an interesting thing. So this name would mean if we attribute the same styled interpretation for Kali, that she's not coming out of the body, she's descending from the Himalayas, not coming out of the Himalayas, right? So it's not exactly like born from the Himalayas. She descends, she comes from the Himalayas. That's a better word for a translation of Haimavatī. So that's a different thing then. That changes the symbol a little bit, because then where are the Himalayas? Of course, Shiva's in the Himalayas, and when the Ganga comes down and lands in his hair, if you need a visual, we can look over at Ananda's hair. If you tie it up, you'll see exactly what the Himalayas is supposed to look like. And if you've been in the Himalayas, if you go up to like a Gangotri, you follow it down, you feel you're like driving up and down Shiva's dreadlock for sure. Coiled, trying to figure out a way to get up the hill. You have to go back down and back up. So this is. And so it's from often the name Haimavatī, it's a name people give, a poetic name you can give a girl, and it's like descends from the lofty peaks. Himalayas, it's not just like mud, like Muladhara Chakra, like earth, right? Like there becomes, it's romantic, it's aspirational, it's vast, right? And you see. Krishna says, among mountains I am the Himalayas. You see the Himalayas, you're seeing something divine realm. They're not earthly. They're between earth and heaven, right? When M, the recorder of the Katamrita, the gospel, he went to Assam Darjeeling, I think that area, and you can see the Himalayas. It's the Himalayan foothills there. And he came back, and Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "Did you see the Himalayas? Did you see the snow-capped peaks?" He goes, "Yes." "Did you cry?" "Yes." It's very, very good, very good. Right, because you're seeing. Krishna says, "That's God. That's me." Right, these glorious sights. They take you. If you've seen the Himalayas, the first time, if you ever I remember the first time. You go to India and you go to the first time you actually you're driving, you're trying to drive up, and the first time you're going to the mountains, I'm in the Himalayas, and there's a Ganga and the Himalayas, it's like maybe there's yogis here, you start thinking like that, right? And then you turn around, and then all of a sudden, for a brief second on the road, you actually catch the first glimpse of the snow-capped peaks. It's like, Haimavatī has that flavor to it. She descends from that realm. These are heavenly realms, right? So. If the Himalayas are the body, the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas are the topmost part of the body. This would be the top of the head, if we were to interpret it back to the body, right? And so this is also the abode of Shiva, where Ganga, she comes from the Himalayas, but she comes from heaven. So she comes from heaven to the Himalayas, then flows down to earth, right? So it's an interesting reverse image of not coming up. We usually think of Kundalini coming up. Right here, it's she who descended, right? But it also is an image of Kundalini, because the Kundalini, how did the Kundalini end up at the very base, trapped and enmeshed in the elements, in the Muladhara Chakra, right? She came down that way. She came down, and then we have to bring her back. We want to take her back to the Himalayas in a certain sense, right? Take her, and where Shiva lives. Shiva lives at the top of the head, and so the whole idea that Kundalini comes up to the top. Right, or the soul aspires for the divine, beyond the body, beyond up to heaven, beyond heaven. This type of aspiration, mapped in the body, is from the base of the spine to the top of the head. So she descended, and spiritual life is her ascent, right? So this is Sri Ramakrishna used these terms a lot, alom and bilom, right? And this is a term in yoga, it's a term in tantra. In yoga, it's simply alom bilom means like back and forth or up and down, right? When you when you do just that like nadus, but without without holding, without retaining your breath, without kumbhaka, right? We do that's called alom bilom pranayama. It means up and down or back and forth, right? So but has another meaning, is involution, evolution, right? And so when we think of up and down or back and forth or involution, evolution, that becomes a symbol of in tantra and yoga of going down from infinite consciousness, trapped, limited into body consciousness, right? And then the way back up, we can do it real simple into abstract. We'll do a little bit abstract. You have infinite consciousness, then you have infinite mind, and then you have intelligence and ego, and then limited mind, some order. I forget which order those belong in, Right? Then you have like space, air, fire, right? Fire, water. Everything's getting denser and slower and thicker, right? And then matter, right? Like water freezes and stops moving, And so you think infinite consciousness, infinite power, infinite consciousness, descending, involving itself, right? Being involved. This idea, we use the word evolution differently in evolutionary thinking now. Evolution is a description. We use it as a description of by random mutations, by random chance mutations, most likely. Things are advantageous for survival, and those genes get passed on. And this is how it's describing how things have changed, how things went from simple to complex, or from one form to another form. But here, the word evolve means it's taking something's being brought back that's been involved, right? So it's a different. The Hindu idea of evolution has to have something involved first, right? So you have infinite consciousness, reduced, seemingly reduced, right? And now it's trapped, and here we are. That's you and me in the physical world. Yogically in Muladhara Chakra, psychologically in body consciousness, and practically in the material world, right? So then there's evolution, which would be from Muladhara. This is how yogis meditate. Kundalini is coming up from the Muladhara, and then from earth to water to fire to air to space to mind and it moves up Mahat and Tattva, all these different things up to Purusha and like that. Depends on what system you're following, how many more tattvas there are above us, right? So she descends as Haimavatī, right? So even that, so it's still the symbol of Kundalini. How the one from that glorious realm has descended, as if seemingly into this realm as us, as Jeev and Jagat, right? As the world and everything. She's become, when Guruji said that unseen power is playing all the parts, is playing individual. This is another way of saying this. She's that one thing is in all of us, as all of us, like that, but in limitation, maybe self-limitation. You have to blame her for it, right? She seems to like it this way, right? But she also wants to go. The spiritual urge, when it awakens in us, we want the Himalayas again. We want the rarefied atmosphere, right? Where God and man are not. I mean, it's like if you've even the physical. I mean, I know the Himalayas are not just the Himalayas, and there's a spiritual Himalayas and the physical. But if you go higher up, you keep going higher and higher up. You realize you're leaving the material world behind somehow. It's not just like mountain climbing or something. It's like you're literally. It's every step you're going. Literally walking to heaven, perhaps. Close as we can get. But that aspiration is the soul's aspiration, which means if it's the soul's aspiration, right, that means it's Ma's aspiration. She is Jiva. She's the life in this world. She's Jagaj-jīva-mayī, right? She's the search for happiness in this world, the search for bliss. She's Jagat-ānanda-kāriṇī, the previous name, right? So this Haimavatī, she ascends and she wants to ascend, right? So again, we're using these names have a Kundalini-ish flavor, and I'm setting that up a little bit because the next names will have that. So then there's another name that is a very popular word with no clear definition. Māyā. Jagaj-jīva-mayī, Haimavatī, Māyā, Mahā-mahī. So now the word Māyā gets stuck in there. And so Māyā is an important name, right? But it's interesting that it gets stuck here, or gets placed here, reveals itself here. So Māyā is it's one of the most important concepts in Hinduism, right? Hindu philosophy, in every school of Hinduism. And every school of Hinduism will have a different definition, right? So there's a lot of definitions of Māyā, right? Like we think of Māyā is like illusion or delusion, right? Illusion, delusion, they're almost the same word, but one's directional, right? One's causative. You're deluded. You're in ignorance, and you've been deluded. I think, I mean, you can say I'm in delusion, but it has a more powerful. So one definition of Maya is that which is and isn't. Right. This is in Vedanta they have all these different. I didn't collect because I had our day got away from us. Didn't go the way as planned. I had planned to because I'd given classes on Maya in the Bhagavatam, so I had probably can find some notes on 16 different definitions of Maya with the appropriate verses and descriptions and examples of them. But one example that which that you see it but it's not there. That's Maya. That's one definition. There's even Māyā, Iti Maya, one of those type of Iti Maya, such and such, that which is this and not that, and both this and that is not called Maya. There's lots of these type of definitions given in the text. So example of what you see but isn't there, right? So one thing is just to something. So that what's an example of that? The example that's classically given is a mirage. You see it, you see water in the desert, but there's no water in the desert. Right, you see it, it's there. You're seeing something, but it's not actually there. So it's a mistaken perception. Maybe that's a way to describe it. There's another way of using the word Maya is a mistaken interpretation of what's perceived. Right, you see it, you're seeing something, but you're not seeing. And the other example of that is in the Sutra commentary, it's given as silver? The term is like the inside of an oyster shell or something that has that silver. She's like, oh, it's silver, right? You're seeing silver. It's not like you see it and it's not there. You see it and it's there, but it's not silver. That's another Maya. So that Maya, you're simply mistaken. You're deeply mistaken about what you're perceiving. That's another thing. So that's another thing. So you either say, oh, this world is Maya. That's a common bold blanket clobber statement that Hindus like to make against each other in their own perceptions. It's Maya. Right, you're in Maya. This is all Maya. Give up Maya. So we can mean it in all these different ways. One way is that it's not really there. Whatever we're seeing, although we're seeing it, it's not really there. Another thing is that we see it and it's there, but it's not what we think. Right. Many other ways of thinking of it. Then what the classical that Shankaracharya has used and become super popular. It's even made it into Devi Bhagavatam. Even the Divine Mother herself uses it as an example of that, the superimposition. That how do we see something that's not there? Right? Oh, we put it there. We want to see water, and we see water there. Right? It's not just a trick. We purposely seeing water. We're mistake. Something's there, but but you can see that's part of both definitions. Like when you see the example of the classic example of a coiled rope, you think it's a snake. You see a snake, and then you realize, oh, it was always a rope, right? I was mistaken. I reacted to a snake. So you put snake on rope, right? Or you saw a snake and there was never a snake, right? So it's that definition also. Or you saw something, looks like a snake, but your interpretation was wrong. It's not a snake, right? All these different ways of using it. In the Devi Bhagavatam, which is closer to this text, right? Ma says, I show myself as a snake and rope. That's interesting. So now we get to this interesting name Maya here, right? It's like the reason turns out that ropes are often confused to look as snakes is they look a lot like snakes, right? It's not and so she's the one showing herself as a world. Right, we see a world of Jeev Jagat, right? We see a world of name and form, of change and manifestation and vibration. So and what do we see? We see a world we see shape and form and name, and she's saying that's me, right? So she's showing her, but we don't see her. We see a world. We see name and form, Jeev and Jagat. And Nama and Rupa, we don't see Brahman, we don't see Shakti, we don't see unseen power. By definition, you don't see unseen power. It's unseen power, right? So, but she's showing herself as this, but we're not seeing her. We're seeing this, and whose fault is that? That's her. That's this is how she's revealed herself. She can reveal herself otherwise if she so chooses, right? And so we often say, you hear something like Mahā-mahī ki jai, victory to Mahā-maya. Now, by most definitions of Maya, that's a horrible thing to say. We're trying to fight Maya, at least overcome Maya, awaken from Maya, renounce Maya, not be tempted by Maya, all these different, not be deluded by Maya. We use all this type of language, right? So by saying Mahā-maya, we say this Maya is her, right? She's showing herself. If we see a world, she's showing herself as this world. She is the world and all living beings, right? But how to see her, right? And so that's a trick, is that she shows herself as a world and we see a world and not her, right? Of course, the saints look at the world and see her. Often they use that language. Sometimes I don't see a world, I only see more. The world disappeared. That's a peak experience. That's not a daily. You can't make tea not seeing the teacup, right? Perhaps in a peak unitive experience, you experience, like there's no difference and there's only subject and object disappear in a flash of unitive singularity. It's like, we can use that type of language, and maybe that's a real thing. The result of that is not there is no teacup. The result of that is like, wow, this teacup is Ma, and the tea is Ma, and the taste of the tea is Ma, and I'm also Ma. It's like that's usually how the saints often will describe the result of their experience, right? That they seeing Ma, they now see her in the world, in Jiva and Jagat, right? So this is interesting. So Maya, and then the next name, Mahā-mahī. Mahi like means power, great. Maha means great, and Mahi means greatness, or something like that. This kind of play. So she's really, really great, right? So it's like but it's interesting to say Maya. She's Maya, and she's Mahā-mahī. Maybe that's just like she's evil and good. I don't think it's like that. That that she's delusion and it's like her greatness is. I think they're connected because not only by sound, Maya, Mahā-mahī. That. When the saints who we believe they've claimed or we believe to have realized the Divine Mother, right? Their description is, when they describe it, she's everything. They are the ones that she's. If you say she's everything, she's this. Swami Vivekananda himself was rejecting when Sri Ramakrishna was talking like this. He's a classic example of somebody who talked just like these type of mystics that don't make sense to us. And Swami Vivekananda at that time, young Narendra, he rejected this overtly Advaitic philosophy. Interesting, he was a great preacher of Advaita, but that's not how he got there. He had to be talked into it and realized into it, forced into it. What ridiculous! He literally say, "What, Brahman has become a glass of water?" I mean, that's blasphemous, right? But Thakur would drink a glass of water, and it's like that's Brahman. Right, one person's blasphemous, the other it's the height of experience, right? So the realizing that she is Maya itself, right? I think that's then you could start saying that what her greatness is, right? This is how great. Then the response is how she's. There's one story Sri Ramakrishna, losing my head. Stories from a monk that I think he saw that monk. They recently read a book that fleshes out the history of different monks and sadhus that Sri Ramakrishna met in his early life, where he got a lot of his examples, right? But he says that he in the morning he'd get up and he'd like clap. Beautiful. What a wonderful job. Excellent. Wonderful, just completely blissed out by how beautiful the great job God has done. And then at night he'd go to bed. In the morning, he wake up, take his bath, and beautiful, excellent, bravo, type thing, right? Seeing God's greatness requires you to see God, right? Not like and so I think these names work that way, right? There's also, if you haven't done this in a long time, but if you look up like Maya and Hinduism on like Wikipedia, it's like the deluding power, a magical power that the gods use to fool people. That's something like that. And that's because that's also one of the languages of Maya. Maya is like magic. And here magic is both the sleight of hand magic, that's Maya, right? Or the real magic. Somebody controlling you or making you do something, some power. some power to overwhelm you and to change your and make you. And so and there's languages, yoga maya, Mahā-mahī. There's different language in like it says like Yashoda, when Yashoda saw the universe in Krishna's mouth, right? And then afterward she forgot and just stop eating mud, right? Not like overwhelmed by, oh my God, he's God. And I saw countless universes, including countless Yashodas looking in Krishna's mouth, looking at, it's one of these almost druggy explained experiences of this wild description. And this described, that she was covered by yoga maya. So not by Maya, like we usually think of Maya, like it's her ignorance, her own foolishness, and she forgot she was overwhelmed by root ignorance once again, not to see, even though Krishna showed her. No, Krishna covered her purposely, right? In order for her to. So there's all kinds of so. Of course, we're not assuming that Krishna is directly or Ma is directly covering us purposely in order to increase our rasa, but maybe that's exactly what he or she is doing, right? We're not seeing her because she wants this play to go like this. She wants to play all the parts. I am one that can become many. She's playing the parts for a reason, right? This yoga maya, Mahā-mahī, Māyā. It's hard to say how this is meant here because no commentary is given except the one we're giving. But I don't think it's just like, she's just total mistaken perception. That's not what's meant by Maya or if it's magic, if it's purposeful, if she's showing herself as this world. She's using name and form. She's using cause, time, space, and causation, right? In order to seemingly play all the parts. And you can see, is she playing all the parts? She's playing all the parts. Maybe if there's only one being, right? She's playing all the parts. And the example is given again as a dream. And when we're dreaming, we're only one being playing all the parts. We create a universe. We create souls. We play all the parts. We cry. We weep. We fall in love. We break up. Everything happens in the dream. Somebody dies. We cry. We wake up like, whoa, I had a wild dream. So that's an example. Not saying that this is what happens, but this is the sages always point to like a dream. They use that line to give an example that we have some idea how one being can become everything and play all the parts, right? And even illusion in a certain sense, right? But it's her own illusion for her. I mean, it's like when we imagine something, it's not real, but it is real. It's not, anyway, the point. And I don't have enough time for my main name, so I'm going to move ahead. Jagaj-jīva-mayī, Haimavatī, Māyā, Mahā-mahī. Nāga-yajño-pavītāṅgī, Nāginī, Nāga-śāyinī. Then the next, I'm just going to read the next verse because Naya Kanya, Deva Kanya, Gandavi Kinarishwari. So a bunch of Naga names, snake names, right? And so Nāga-yajño-pavītāṅgī, Nāginī, Nāga-śāyinī. So the next name is Nāga-yajño-pavītāṅgī. I'll come back to that because Nāginī. Nāginī means she who is a snake, right? She's Naga and Nāginī. Naga is the masculine word for a snake, right? The general word for the species and the name of a boy snake, and a girl snake is Nāginī, right? And if you were to give a snake a formal name, Naga and Nāginī. This is Mr. and Mrs. Snake, Naga and Nāginī. So she's Mrs. Snake, or she is Snake. So that's a simple thing. So she's Nāginī. So Nāga-śāyinī, and then there's Naga in the next name. The next verse is Naga Kanya. She's the daughter of the snakes, and then she's the daughter of the Deva Kanya, daughter of the gods. Kinarishwari, she's the goddess of the Kinaras. So we're listing all these semi-divine beings. So where this text is identifying her as all these Gandharvas and Kinaras and Dakinis and Yakinis. They'll go into all these, and Nagas are one of such name, right? So it's working into that thing, but it starts out very clear. She's Naga, she's Nāginī, she's a serpent, right? So Nāginī is the serpent. She's a queen of serpents. There's many deities called Nāginī. That's why I'm bringing it up. And serpents have a lot of symbolism, you can imagine. We're talking about Kundalini, so the main yogis, for a yogi, the serpent is a symbol of Kundalini. And just like when we think of this infinite power, little bitty living space, as the old movie shows, like that, it seems to be, if you do that, you imagine this thing, when you compact it, it seems to be coiled. You coil like a spring. Like click, 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 click. Don't touch it, careful, right? And then you touch it, and so Kundalini is described as, whether this is a literal thing or a symbolic thing, as coiled energy, and a coiled thing, all that tension, all the potentiality, the tension, its nature is to release and straighten itself. That's how Jack in the Box like that works. Once you release the thing that's covering it, it explodes and rights it wants to become straight, and you're making it coiled and bent and compressed, right? And so that's one of the reasons that she's described as a snake, because snakes are often seen coiled. That's the most common image of a snake, a coiled snake, right? Coiled. And so Kundalini is visualized by tantric yogis as coiled at the base of the spine, underneath Muladhara, right? And it's imagined that there's a black Shiva lingam at the base of the spine, and she's coiled 3.5 times, right? That has its meaning, also has to do with the letters of Om. It has to do with the gunas and all kinds of things like that. We won't get too much into it. With her tail in its mouth, right? So that's and so you need actually once the tail gets, then it's uncoils herself, right? And so that's an interesting image to use a spring idea, right? Coiled. But if you see a coiled snake, right? I don't know if you like snakes. I like snakes. He likes snakes. You love snakes, right? Horrified of snakes. You're in the wrong religion. But we'll make room for you, don't worry.
I didn't grow up at the foothills.
Yes.
This is scary.
No, actually, in India, snakes, until recently, maybe even now, the number one cause of accidental death is snake bite. So fear of snakes is a real thing, right? We have 4 varieties of poisonous snakes in California, in this part of California, I think, right? But practically that's saying there's no poisonous snakes in California because they've lost habitat. We have, luckily here, luckily we still have some snakes here, but we haven't had one come into the garden in years. They used to come all the time, into the garden. There's less. So it's a sad thing, but it's less dangerous, but also very sad I'm thinking we like snakes. So a snake, when you see a coiled, like a cobra or a rattlesnake, they're coiled, right? And like this, I show you I like snakes. I have a giant tattoo of a snake, right? For this exact purpose. It's coiled. Coiled snake, not moving, right, can straighten itself out really fast. A coiled snake becoming a straight snake, that's usually, if it's in your direction, it's about that's a bite, right? It's like, that the potential energy of a snake, a coiled snake. It's actually interesting. The potential energy of a straight snake, it'd have to coil up near its head and then make a jump at you to really get to you, right? But coiled, it has its full length it can go, right? So that's so it's a perfect symbol of Kundalini. It's both the idea of coiled as in compressed, but coiled as in when it releases, when it chooses to release. That's the thing, is like with a spring, we can release it, right? Kundalini is not like that, right? She's Nāginī. It's not just some snake that we trapped in a box or a spring that we use, even though I use that click, click, click image just to show the way it's imagined, right? But she can straighten herself when she likes, right? And so there's a danger, there's systems of yoga that are strong, powerful Kundalini, where you're like, if I have my back's a little bad right now. Even to demonstrate, I'd hurt my back. The breath, the fire stuff. You're trying to get up. Trying to awaken like that. It can do something. It really what it does is flushes the system with prana, and that's good because it clears the way for Kundalini. But actually, the idea of trying to forcefully awaken Kundalini, this is in classical Hinduism. That's demons do that, not devotees, because the Kundalini is the goddess. And we do not force our will upon the goddess. the demons, what we said, I shall come marry, what is it, what the Shumba and Nishumba, marry Shumba and Nishumba, or I'll drag you by the hair. It's like you see what happens, Shumba and Nishumba, and those who threaten to force her to do something, drag her by the hair. This is not it's a very an unwise attempt, right? Because like a serpent, right, she's very dangerous, right? And so her awakening is very dangerous. So better you can get a snake to come out, to come towards you lovingly, by food or by affection. It's like, oh, how beautiful. There's other ways to bring up the snake, but trying to force her up is a very dangerous thing. Because also this is the goddess, and we're servants of the goddess, worshippers of the goddess, not manipulators of her energy for our own selfish ends. So sometimes you can see even our language of our Shakti sadhanas can be a little dangerous. We have to, I think it's not just a little. I think it's very dangerous. But so snakes are very dangerous, right? It's potential energy, potential power, coiled energy. But she's Nāginī. She is, so by saying that the snake image is the goddess, it's interesting that. Another thing why snakes are. Every religion, many religions, every religion has snake symbolism, and they use, and they're all actually symbolizing the same type of thing, but they give it different values, right? So in one religion the snake is a goddess, another religion the snake is a devil, right? And you can say, oh, they're giving two different meanings of the snake. I think they're giving the same meaning but different value, right? Because the thing they're attributing is the same quality. It's just one's, cautiously going, the other is reacting against, right? But one of the things, so snakes have many symbolic properties, or been viewed symbolically. So one is this is a overtly Hindu tantric Shaktism yogic thing of Kundalini, right? Another quality of the snake is that of time, right? Because snakes have a quality. Not only are they coiled, not only do they uncoil, and not only are they dangerous, they also shed their skin. Right, and so like the moon goes to Amavasya, and then you think it's dead, and all of a sudden it leaves the dark shell behind, and it comes out. Right, that's the month itself is a snake shedding its skin, right, and so it becomes a symbol of time. It becomes a symbol of, I guess, rebirth, but not really. Actually, it's a symbol of eternality. That's a better way of saying it, right? Because snakes, legendarily, that's a word. That word? That's not a word. Legendarily, by legend, according to perceived by legend, snakes are considered to be immortal in Hinduism, right? Now, of course, that's not really true. People know that eventually snakes get old and die, right? But why are they considered immortal? Is because in one sense nobody really sees, unless you kill a snake, you don't see a dead snake. I mean, I'm sure people will put them in an aquarium and fed them, and eventually they get old and die. So it's not like the big unveil popping of a cultural expectation that snakes live forever. But they're said to live forever because you don't see a dead snake. And what you you keep seeing the snake's old body, and a live snake slither out of it. Right, so so unless you kill a snake doesn't die in popular belief or popular view. Right? Therefore, killing a snake is really inauspicious. One of the reasons, right? Because you're killing something that on its own shouldn't die. Right? You're unnatural. Of course, killing anything's unnatural, but most things just die and don't come out of their dead body. Right? Snakes are something that die and come out of their dead body. So to kill it so it doesn't do that is really doing something. Right, so the snake becomes also a symbol of the soul, right, which is constantly, it never really dies, right? But to kill a person is a very huge crime, a very huge thing, but a person never really dies. It's an interesting type of thing. But it's also, so it's a symbol of time, symbol of immortality, but it's a different type of immortality. So it's I'll say it's a symbol of rebirth, but it's not a symbol of rebirth, because it's a symbol of resurrection. Interestingly enough, right? It's more that idea, right? Something's about to die, or something dies out of its own body. It continues living, and something new comes out, right? Rather than like rebirth as this going to another soul, another body, and then starting like we normally. It's not a symbol of reincarnation generally. That's but it's in a sense that the soul doesn't die or like that. And so killing a snake is considered very, very inauspicious. And even if you want to know, maybe you can remember in your life whether or not you've killed a snake or had a snake killed. But can you know if you've killed a snake in your past life? It's an interesting thing. You can know if you killed a snake. There is any Vedic astrologer, it will only take a few minutes to find out if you've killed a snake in your past life. Sharpa, what's it called? Doha or some dosha or something like that. There's some, and and so we and it said actually that if you've like I've like our friend revered Swami Bhajanananda Saraswati Maharaj from Rishikesh, he had an ashram in the Himalayas in the jungle, a true jungle ashram, one of the nicest ashrams in the world while it was there. And that snake country. We're in the jungle. We're not in the city, And many snakes, and snakes have never bothered him, right? Even there'll be a viper in his room. He picks it out and takes it out of his room, Even I had a cobra go across my, I didn't realize snake, and then like a worker that was there was like. I was like, oh, I guess that's a cobra. I said, bad. He goes, he was like freezing. I thought I like snakes, I didn't think he told me the cobras were still in dormition. They were asleep. Like, they weren't. But there's another Swami named Deva Bhaktananda, great name, right, from Shivananda Ashram, and he lives at the big ashram, and he goes to our friend's ashram for meditation in the jungle. Everybody wants to meditate by the Ganga in the jungle. It's like that's everybody's dream, right? So he goes there. But every time he goes there, he's bothered by snakes. They chase him around. Cobras come and hiss at him, and it's like he's constantly everywhere he goes, he's being bothered by snakes. Like where nobody else. Swami Bhajanananda never bothered by snakes, right? So this is one view is that because in his past life he killed a snake, right? They keep memory. This is whether this is true or not. This is classical type of thing. And so there's so people who find this, who have this, there's different pujas that can be done to rectify this sin of killing the snake, and actually very often we'll find like in the pranami box or something, like we're clearing out the money of the box and we find these two little silver snakes. It's like somebody an astrologer told you have to make a donation of 2 silver snakes to a Shiva temple. Right, and then we find actually you can't really see, but our Shiva here, there's a little like a fence around him. Around that, there's all kinds of little tiny. We eventually give them to Shiva. There's all these little snakes that people have donated to rectify their fact that that's why they're not having children. That's there's all the kind of beliefs in Vedic astrology of the what cause like that. But anyways, that's why it's so. And when a snake is killed by accident, right, it's cremated the same way a human being is. You give the full ceremony. It's interesting. They're not given regular. So that's respecting them or fearing them both, right? Both things. That's both things. Okay. We'll see if I get okay. Nāginī. So another quality of this so the snake is a symbol of the goddess. It is the goddess, symbol of immortality, symbol of potential, of spiritual energy. It's a symbol of kundalini, of coiled energy, of potential energy, right? All those type of things, right? As a result, it's a symbol of the goddess, right, and of the goddess traditions. Right, and so you have, in some traditions, they've demonized the serpent or the snake, right? Where the snakes are associated with trees, it's associated with goddesses, right? And so even in the book of Genesis, we have a snake under a tree, right? It's interesting, that snake, who's that snake? Oh, it's the devil, right? It's interesting, it's never assigned, that's something we have assigned that later, right? Christianity has assigned that later, right? It's never assigned devil. And it's also called, what is it, the deceiver or the liar, right? Interesting. The only one that didn't lie in the story, right? In the story, Adam lies, Eve lies, God lies, but the snake does not lie, and he's called the liar. Interestingly enough, right? There's a lot very interesting. There's new research, and I'm not ready to I want to make a fool of myself making statements, scholarly statements beyond my knowledge. But they've discovered, this is the ancient Hebrews had lots of goddesses before monotheism became a thing, became its primary defining. And so there was a goddess associated with trees, right, and snakes, right? And the story as it's presented in the book of Genesis would be seen by the original hearers as the triumph of a new god over the old religion. That's one of the meanings that was given, right? And interesting enough, the goddess whose name I'm forgetting, who's associated with trees and snakes, and is in ancient times, this is like really ancient times, before there was formal Judaism and things like that, she was one of the wives of Jehovah, who became Jehovah. So he was married once in very ancient times. This is like an anthropological study of ancient goddess traditions, you know. That's very, very interesting. So, but you see that and also trees and snakes and goddesses, we have a tree outside. We worship Manasa Devi, the snake goddess, right? We have snakes. Usually snake goddess temples are always near trees, at the base of trees, right? They're very significant. So she's, and so then you have, what's the other, St. Patrick's Day, right? It's a good day to wear green and get drunk. That's apparently the way you celebrate great St. Patrick. St. Patrick is attributed, it's not true in one sense, you know, he chased the snakes out of Ireland, right? You know, a story like that. There are no snakes in Ireland, it's true, but there's never been snakes in Ireland. He did not chase the snakes out of Ireland. He chased paganism out of Ireland, right? And so the snakes become the symbol of paganism, right? So our yearly post on St. Patrick's Day is calling back all the snakes, the serpents, you know, or calling back the serpents, you know, the old religion can still come back, you know. Or St. George, you know, this image of St. George where he's on a horse and he's killing a dragon. Now that's a very ancient pagan story. It's been attributed to several saints. It ended up with St. George. It's not there's a historical development of that story. But there's part of the story where that dragon, what do dragons do? Right? In all these old stories, they guard treasures. Right? That's another thing. They guard this symbol of Kundalini and things like that also. But they're guarding treasures, and they're they were going to in the story of Saint George slaying the dragon or the serpent. It's a female dragon, right? And who guards the treasure. So in Hinduism, we would say that's kamini kanchan, lust and greed, right? But you see, his response is to slay it, right? This is rather than to Sri Ramakrishna said, Māyā, because she's the one who's the serpent's also Māyā. Māyā cannot be fought, right? You cannot destroy Māyā. She's Ma. It's Ma, right? He says Māyā must be perpetuated, must be worshipped. And then then he would show it and he'd demonstrate, Ma, do not delude me by thy world bewitching Māyā. Don't let me forget, let me see you. I don't want name and fame, Ma. I only want to love you. I don't know how to worship you. Give me pure love for you. Let me think of you all that. He'd demonstrate the way to pray to the Ma. But as always, you cannot fight Māyā. If you fight Māyā, you will definitely lose, right? You know, because she's God, right? And no matter all the definitions of Māyā, you cannot fight her. You have to perpetuate her. The whole Chandi starts with this very point, right? That Māyā must be perpetuated. So Nāginī, and the Nāga-śāyinī we'll do next week, but I do have to say at least a few words of Nāga-yajño-pavītāṅgī. She is the sacred thread. She is a Naga sacred thread on the body. So, or she could say she's the one who wears a Naga as her sacred thread, her yajña-pavitra, right? So that's an interesting thing. So of course, Ma you don't see as much, but actually in proper image of the Ma, there'll be a sacred thread shaped like a snake. But you'll see this more with Shiva. Almost all images of Shiva will have a sacred thread as a snake, or with Ganesha, he has a sacred thread his sacred thread is a snake, right? Or he's the snake, and it's always the same thing because the yajña-pavitra, as per the tantric tradition, is Kundalini. Right, it's made of 3 strings, Ida, Pingala, and Shushumna, right, tied with 3 knots, which is Brahma Granthi, Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, and Rudra Granthi. These are knots in the body, right? And even when it's interesting, when you tie a sacred thread, there's methods of tying them given in old tradition. And there's a way, it's actually you take the 3 strings like that, and then you tie it in a certain way. You have to sort of make the first knot. You have to imagine part of the string as a tree. And then the string that you're using to tie is a snake. And the snake goes around the tree 3 times, goes up and goes back into the hole, and you pull the knot. Right, so it's using the snakes and trees and the triple kundalini and the 3 knots like that, and then so it's identifying it's giving the interpretation that the sacred thread is ultimately she who wears the sacred thread of that's a serpent, or who is the sacred thread, which is a serpent, like that. So actually, there's Ida, Pingala, and Shushumna. So then what happens when you, if you've seen the tradition, the sannyasi we don't wear anymore, but you take the string, and some families, they don't all do it. You wrap it, you take the string and you wrap it around your thumb 3 times, and then you chant the Gayatri mantra or whatever mantra is part of it, right? You do the Gayatri mantra, right? Even that, the kundalini is at the base of the spine with a Shivalingam, and the serpent is wrapped 3.5 times. So this is now your Shivalingam, right? And then you're chanting. So by doing this, there's in the Kali Manasa Puja, we talked about this in our classes on the Kali Puja. Part of the Manasa Puja is offering japa, and part of worship, you do the worship and you offer japa. In the internal worship, what do you offer japa? You offer japa on the beads of the chakras, the syllables of the chakras, strung on the string of kundalini, it says. Right, so then actually when you're chanting on your fingers, you're not chanting on your fingers. You're chanting on the string of kundalini and on the beads of the chakras. Right, so you go, if you go up, alum bilam, if you go up, that's 50. You go down, that's 50. Right, of the petals. And if you go up the center, right, including bindu, that's 8. You have your 108. So the very process of doing japa, you're going up and down the spine, alum bilam, from the Himalayas down, back up, this back and forth. Because we're still talking about snakes, we'll pick up next week, and we'll revisit that with some more, because my original whole talk was on that one name. So I did it in the last 6 minutes. So we'll pick it up with this name. We'll back up a little bit and recover and build upon that. Thank you for your kind attention. Any comments, questions, challenges, donations? Hari Om Tat Sat. You can